The morning air was unusually heavy, as if the city itself knew something was about to go terribly wrong. Outside the Central District Court, a crowd of reporters gathered, cameras aimed, waiting to catch a glimpse of the man being transported inside. But this wasn't just any prisoner. This was Zakir Mehmood, a name that had become synonymous with brutality and fear. Zakir wasn't a petty criminal or a career thief. He was a former military-trained operative turned gang leader, accused of orchestrating more than a dozen murders, arms trafficking, and even links to a political assassination. What made him especially dangerous wasn't just his record, but his mind. Calculated, calm under pressure, and always 5 steps ahead, Zakir was a predator in human skin. He had escaped prison once before, 5 years ago, only to be recaptured in a bloody shootout that left 3 officers dead. Today's hearing was supposed to be routine, a pre-trial session to confirm evidence documentation. But because of Zakir's history, the security was tight. Armed police commandos stood guard at every corner of the building. The courtroom had been cleared of any unnecessary personnel, and metal detectors had been reinforced at all entrances. Even Zakir himself was shackled in a reinforced steel belt, his hands and feet cuffed, escorted by 6 heavily armed guards. As he entered the courtroom, every eye was on him. Even the judge seemed slightly tense, tapping his pen against the bench more often than usual. The prosecution lawyer shuffled his notes nervously. A quiet tension hung in the air, not because of anything Zakir did or said, but because of what he might do. But to the ordinary eye, everything appeared fine. Zakir sat silently, staring ahead, not blinking, not moving, almost too calm. That's what made it chilling. He didn't look like a man under pressure. He looked like a man waiting for something. There was no sign of panic, no anxiety about the long sentence he faced, just eerie stillness. A junior officer leaned over to whisper something to the head of security. The head guard nodded, then looked at Zakir. For a split second, their eyes met, and it felt like time paused. Zakir gave a small, almost invisible smile. That's when something began to feel off. One of the courtroom lights flickered briefly. A civilian sitting in the back row stood and exited quietly. Too quietly. One of the guards at the back coughed twice, and then subtly adjusted his vest. These were minor things, but they didn't go unnoticed by the observant few. Something was brewing. What no one realized, at least not yet, was that a storm was about to erupt within those 4 walls. A carefully calculated plan, months in the making, was ticking toward zero, and Zakir Mehmood was about to do the unthinkable, right in the heart of what should have been the safest place in the city. This wasn't just another court hearing, it was the beginning of a nightmare. It happened in less than 30 seconds. One moment, the judge was reading through the case files, the defense lawyer was adjusting his tie, and the guards were holding their positions. The next moment, the room exploded into chaos. But how did Zakir Mehmood, shackled and surrounded by 6 armed guards, manage to pull off the impossible? The truth was buried deep in months of planning and manipulation. A low-ranking officer on the escort team had been compromised, blackmailed into smuggling in a tiny custom-built pistol, no bigger than the palm of a hand, broken down into parts and hidden inside what appeared to be ordinary documents carried by a legal intern. The intern, as later discovered, was never officially registered with any law firm. He was a plant, and no one had questioned it. Just as the judge prepared to announce a date for the next hearing, Zakir slightly shifted in his seat. The compromised guard leaned down, pretending to tighten Zakir's shackles. But in that moment, he slipped something small into Zakir's cuffed hands, a small magnetic pin and a folded component hidden in the inner lining of his prison uniform. With practiced precision, Zakir moved. His right wrist snapped forward, pulling free of the supposedly secure restraints, disabled by the magnetic pin. The left cuff followed a second later. What happened next was a blur. A deafening crack shattered the silence. A single gunshot rang out, followed by screaming. The courtroom exploded into panic. One of the guards staggered backward, blood pouring from his neck. Another tried to raise his rifle, but Zakir was already on him. A second shot, point blank to the chest. The man collapsed. The remaining guards shouted commands, some aiming at Zakir, others ducking for cover, but the confusion worked in his favor. The crowd in the gallery panicked, bolting for the exits. Papers flew in the air. The judge dropped beneath the bench. Someone hit the alarm, but it was already too late. Zakir leapt over the wooden barrier separating the accused from the courtroom floor, snatching the fallen guard's weapon as he moved. Now armed with a full-sized pistol and a backup magazine, he fired 3 more shots, one striking a ceiling light, plunging the courtroom into partial darkness. Using the chaos, he headed toward the emergency exit. A guard tried to block his path. Zakir didn't hesitate. 2 shots dropped the man instantly. Outside the courtroom, the corridor was beginning to flood with police responding to the alarm, but Zakir had memorized the layout. He turned left, then right, darting through a maintenance hallway no one else thought to monitor. His escape vehicle, a black van with government plates, was already waiting in the alley, engine running. By the time the courtroom was secured and the building locked down, Zakir Mehmood was gone. Vanished, escaped not just from court, but from the law itself. Again, the manhunt was about to begin. Zakir Mehmood's escape wasn't just a headline, it was a full-blown national emergency. Within minutes of the breakout, the entire court complex was locked down. Sirens echoed through the city's core as special forces and SWAT teams flooded the area. Roads were barricaded, nearby metro stations shut down, and helicopters circled overhead like vultures searching for prey. Police checkpoints popped up at every major highway exit, scanning vehicles and questioning drivers. The manhunt had officially begun. The Home Ministry issued a red alert across multiple districts. High-level meetings were called, intelligence agencies looped in, and an emergency coordination cell was activated. CCTV footage from nearby buildings was immediately pulled, drones were deployed, and facial recognition systems across the city were set to scan for Zakir's profile. But despite the overwhelming force mobilized in a matter of hours, he had vanished without a trace. The public response was immediate, and terrifying social media exploded. Hashtags like "Nar Zakir escaped," "Yar courtroom chaos," and "Nar security failure" trended across the country. News channels interrupted their regular programming to deliver non-stop coverage. Within an hour, every major media outlet was broadcasting grainy footage of the courtroom chaos, along with dramatic reenactments, speculation about Zakir's whereabouts, and furious commentary from politicians and analysts. In one viral clip, an eyewitness, a court clerk, recounted the moment Zakir pulled the trigger. "He didn't look human. I saw him shoot a man without blinking. I was hiding under the desk. I thought I'd die right there." Another witness, a young intern who had been in the gallery, trembled as she described the panic. People were screaming, running, falling over each other. "I heard 3, maybe 4 shots. I saw blood on the floor. It was like a war zone." Security experts weren't holding back either. Colonel Retdi Navid Raza, a former intelligence officer, spoke bluntly on live TV. This wasn't an escape, it was an operation, planned, funded, executed with military precision. Zakir didn't just slip through the cracks, someone opened the door for him. Others echoed the same concern. How did a high-risk prisoner manage to get a weapon inside one of the most secure courtrooms in the country? Theories spread like wildfire. Was it an inside job? A bribed official? A distraction orchestrated to draw attention away from a larger criminal operation? Amidst the chaos, citizens were left feeling exposed and betrayed. Parents kept children home from school. Businesses near the court district shut down early. Public confidence in the justice system took a brutal hit. Meanwhile, every second Zakir remained free only deepened the nightmare. He had outsmarted the system before, and now, with blood on his hands and the city in fear, he was out there again armed, dangerous, and invisible. As the dust settled and the shock wore off, investigators began piecing together the fragments left behind in Zakir Mehmood's dramatic escape. And the deeper they dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a random act of desperation. It was a meticulously coordinated operation, pulled off with chilling precision. And worse, it likely involved people on the inside. Initial forensic reports confirmed what many had feared. The weapon used by Zakir wasn't smuggled in by force. It had bypassed security, meaning someone with authority had either looked the other way or helped make it happen. CCTV footage from the court's rear corridor showed a blurry figure, a man in a lawyer's robe, entering a restricted maintenance hallway moments before the escape. What raised red flags was that no such lawyer had been officially registered to appear in court that day. His identity card, as later discovered, was fake. He had walked past multiple security checkpoints, dressed like a professional, carrying a leather file that likely held the gun in parts. The real twist came when investigators cross-referenced visitor logs and court staff entries. A junior officer, guard Naeem Akhtar, had entered the courtroom early that morning, 2 hours before the prisoner's arrival. He claimed to be inspecting security details, but interviews revealed he wasn't authorized to be there at that time. What made it more suspicious was that Akhtar had recently deposited a large sum of money into his account, over 5 million rupees, with no explanation of its source. By the third day of the investigation, it was becoming increasingly clear. Zakir hadn't just escaped from the system, he had used the system. The bigger revelation came when intelligence officers tracked down the getaway vehicle. Abandoned just outside city limits, it was registered to a shell company tied to an international arms syndicate operating out of Dubai. Zakir's connections, it turned out, went far beyond local gangs. He had ties to an underground network of mercenaries, ex-military operatives, and corrupt officials who traded in weapons, human trafficking, and political assassinations. Evidence pointed toward a carefully layered structure. Zakir's courtroom escape wasn't just to avoid prison. It was to rejoin a criminal empire that had been weakened in his absence. Some even speculated that his arrest years ago had been orchestrated by rivals within the same network. Now he was back, and this time he had allies both in the underworld and within the institutions meant to keep him in check. Perhaps the most disturbing piece of the puzzle came from an anonymous whistleblower, a court clerk who claimed to have overheard a conversation between a defense lawyer and a uniformed officer days before the hearing. The message was simple, whispered and chilling. "It happens tomorrow. Be ready." An internal probe was immediately launched. Several guards were suspended. A well-known defense attorney went missing, and the public, already reeling from fear, was now outraged at the possibility that those entrusted to uphold justice were the ones who helped destroy it. Zakir Mehmood hadn't just escaped custody, he had exposed the rot within the system. For 12 days, Zakir Mehmood remained a ghost, vanishing into the criminal underworld he once ruled. Every major intelligence unit in the country, from local task forces to federal agencies, was on his trail. Tips poured in from every direction, but most were dead ends. Some believed he had already crossed the border. Others were sure he was hiding in plain sight, protected by those who owed him favors or feared him. Then, on the 13th night, a breakthrough came. Surveillance drones in a remote district outside Islamabad picked up heat signatures at an abandoned farmhouse. The area was quiet, isolated, and strategically placed near a smuggling route. Thermal scans confirmed the presence of multiple armed individuals, and one of them matched Zakir's description. The authorities moved quickly, no mistakes this time. At 3:14 a.m., an elite counter-terror unit surrounded the farmhouse. Floodlights beamed down. A voice crackled through the loudspeaker. "Zakir Mehmood, this is your last warning. Surrender now." There was silence. Then, gunfire. What followed was an intense 30-minute standoff. Zakir, holed up with 3 heavily armed men, fired relentlessly. Grenades were thrown. The walls shook with blasts. The farmhouse windows shattered. One officer was critically injured, another killed by sniper fire from within. But Zakir was no longer the calm, calculating mastermind he had once been. He was cornered, desperate, outnumbered, outgunned. His escape had exposed too many people. The network that helped him rise was now trying to erase him. At 3:47 a.m., a final breach was ordered. The unit stormed the farmhouse in a coordinated sweep. 2 of Zakir's men were killed instantly. The third surrendered. And in the back room, behind an overturned table and blood-smeared floor, they found Zakir, fatally wounded but alive. He died en route to the hospital, blood loss too severe to control. He never spoke a word. The news hit the country like a lightning strike. Zakir Mehmood, public enemy number one. One dash was dead, but the victory was hollow. In the aftermath, public outrage only intensified. Protests erupted outside court buildings, demanding accountability for the officials who had enabled the escape. Investigations led to multiple arrests. Guards, lawyers, even a senior intelligence officer found complicit in shielding Zakir's operation. The justice system was forced to confront its most dangerous enemy. Not Zakir, but the corruption that allowed him to thrive. Courtroom security was overhauled nationwide. Facial recognition systems were mandated, body scanners upgraded, and visitor protocols made airtight. But the damage to public trust couldn't be fixed with technology alone. For many, the system had failed long before Zakir pulled that trigger in court. And though his story ended in blood and gunfire, the scars he left behind, on families, institutions, and the nation's conscience, would remain far longer than his name in the headlines. Zakir Mehmood escaped prison, but in doing so, he imprisoned a nation in fear.